TV7 Israel News is made possible thanks to your generous donations. Shalom, good evening. This is TV7 Israel News broadcast to you from Jerusalem. Israeli Minister of Strategic Affairs Ron Dermer stresses that he trusts U.S. President Donald Trump's committed resolve to ensure that the Islamic Republic of Iran does not achieve nuclear weapon capabilities. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas reiterates Tehran's objection to negotiate on anything other than its nuclear program. French Foreign Minister Noel Barrot asserts that Europe is considering whether to trigger its snapback mechanism, which would reinvigorate a global sanctions regime against Iran. Israel will not relent until it fulfills its war objectives in accordance with Jerusalem's Security Cabinet's decision, which was taken following the atrocities which the Islamist Hamas and its Palestinian terror affiliates committed on October 7th of 2023. Israeli Minister of Strategic Affairs Ron Dermer, in a Q&A session at the JNS International Policy Summit in Jerusalem, stressed that when it comes to the ongoing war versus Hamas in the Gaza Strip, the ultimate question is whether war ends with victory or with defeat.
That's not the question. The question is, do you end the war with a victory or with a defeat? Do you accept the terms of those who did what they did on October 7th or not? And after October 7th, we had a cabinet meeting and we set clear goals. And we said we're going to dismantle Hamas's military capability. We're going to end its rule in Gaza. We're going to ensure that Gaza never poses a threat to the state of Israel, and we're going to return all our hostages. That's the goals that we set out, and we intend to achieve them. And for a lot of people, they think you have to choose between those goals. There are people you'll meet in Israel who say, forget about the hostages, just finish the war. And there are people who say, forget about the war, just return the hostages. Well, we're not going to do that.
Minister Dermer was further asked about the nuclear negotiations between the United States and the Islamic Republic of Iran, to which he expressed confidence in U.S. President Donald Trump's committed resolve to ensure that the Ayatollah regime, which calls for the destruction of both Israel and the United States, does not attain weapons of mass destruction.
And I have a lot of confidence that President Trump would walk away from a bad deal today, just as he walked away from a bad deal then. And I think he's been very clear. Iran's never going to have a nuclear weapon. And I think what that means for me as a president, it's not just about his 4 years in office. It's about ensuring that Iran can never get a nuclear weapon. And Iran, I don't have to remind this audience, they're a regime that calls and works for the destruction of Israel, leads their own people in chants of death to Israel and death to America. So I'm confident with him in the White House that he's not going to go for a bad deal. He's made clear what a good deal would look like, where they can actually dismantle their enrichment program, and we'll just have to wait and see how these talks pan out. But he said it's very clear. We're either going to achieve it this way or we're going to achieve it that way, and I think we're working very, very closely together to make sure that happens.
Asked further whether Israel would consider confronting Iran's nuclear program on its own in the event that a bad deal is struck, Minister Dermer asserted that when Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he will do whatever is necessary to thwart Tehran's nuclear ambitions, people should believe him.
Had it not been for Prime Minister Netanyahu, Iran would have nuclear weapons a long time ago. What he has done, both in mobilizing the world and raising international awareness about this problem, but also the actions that Israel has taken, sometimes by itself, sometimes in coordination with others that I'm not going to get into, has delayed Iran's nuclear program, but it hasn't stopped it. And when the Prime Minister of Israel says he will do whatever he has to do to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons, believe him. Believe him.
Meanwhile, at the Israeli Defense Ministry in Tel Aviv, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz held a meeting with the IDF General Staff ahead of Israel's Remembrance Day, during the course of which he stressed the first priority of Israel's defense establishment, namely, to prevent Iran's nuclear ambitions.
The main tasks, first and foremost, is to prevent a nuclear weapon from Iran. Israel will not allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. We are preparing. We, of course, are holding in-depth discussions with the United States.
It is important to know that Jerusalem's top defense official hosted U.S. Central Command Commander General Michael Kurilla at the Israeli Defense Ministry over the weekend, during the course of which extensive deliberations were held regarding the tightening of Israeli-American strategic cooperation on a number of crucial security topics in the Middle East. Meanwhile, in Tehran, the Iranian Foreign Ministry relayed a scathing warning against anyone planning to strike at the Islamic Republic and urged Western countries to reconsider their support for Israel.
Any provocation or wrongful action against the Islamic Republic of Iran will be met with a decisive response. However, I believe Western countries, especially those who continue to openly support this regime, should reconsider, rethink carefully that they are, in fact, playing a role in setting the stage for the continuation of threats against international peace and security, aiding an entity whose existence is contingent upon and tied to crisis, war, and violence in the region.
Following a deadly explosion that rocked Iran's industrial zone in Bandar Abbas on Saturday, reportedly claiming the lives of at least 70 people, with over 1,200 others injured, the Iranian Foreign Ministry said an investigation into the cause of the explosion was still ongoing.
What I can say is that it happened at the same time. The reason, the cause is under investigation. We would not prejudge. So we will wait for our responsible authorities to tell us what happened there.
It is interesting to note that with regard to ongoing nuclear negotiations between Iran and the United States, while the Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman explicitly stressed that he does not intend to negotiate publicly, he was evidently instructed to relay a red line to the Trump administration in English regarding Tehran's nuclear enrichment.
I guess everyone understands that we are not going to negotiate in public. But as a matter of principle, enrichment is and has to be part and parcel of any fair and realistic agreement that we may entertain with other partners.
Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araqchi, immediately after the last round of negotiations with the United States and the Sultanate of Oman on Saturday, highlighted that large gaps remain between Washington and Tehran.
The main task, first and foremost, is to prevent a nuclear weapon from Iran. Israel will not allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. We are preparing. We, of course, are holding in-depth discussions with the United States.
The Ayatollah regime's top diplomat continued by reiterating the Islamic Republic's position that the talks are exclusively about Iran's nuclear program and not about its space and ballistic missiles program, for instance, which includes technological advancements that may evolve into its capacity to obtain intercontinental ballistic missiles.
Let me be clear, we are only discussing issues related to nuclear power. We are not negotiating any other issues. Although when we say nuclear-related, we mean building trust in Iran's nuclear program in exchange for sanction removals. Discussions about the nuclear program and sanction go together, but it's only known as the nuclear issue. We only discuss this issue and will not accept negotiating any other issues. And in the past 3 rounds, this has been respected by both sides.
Meanwhile, at the United Nations headquarters in New York, French Foreign Minister Noel Barrot, after holding a private briefing with IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi, stressed Europe's position vis-à-vis the nuclear talks between the United States and Iran.
So what serves the interests of Europe is for Iran never to have a bomb. And that's why we support and we encourage the ongoing discussions between the US and Iran. We're coordinating closely with Marco Rubio and Steve Witkoff, because as you know, we're getting closer and closer every week to the expiration of the JCPOA. And so Europeans that remained within the framework of the JCPOA, we'll have an important decision to make by the summer, the decision to reapply the sanctions that were lifted 10 years ago. And this, of course, will depend on the commitments that Iran is willing to make. What we're sensing is willingness on both parts to reach an agreement that would lead to a concrete, tangible, and verifiable rollback of Iran's nuclear program.
Thank you for watching TV7 Israel News. As the end of the month is fast approaching, I would like to once again encourage you to support TV7 Israel, which is a non-profit ministry, with a donation. You can do so via our website at www.tv7israelnews.com. In tandem, I would like to thank TV7 Israel's family of supporters, as your steadfast support allows us to produce content that truly matters, impacting millions of viewers worldwide. Lastly, keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem and salvation of Israel. I'm Jonathan Hassan, wishing you an Erev Mevorach, and God willing, we'll see you during our next update. Until then, Shalom from Jerusalem.